3 days before my wedding. I thought my life was perfect. The love of my life, a dream ceremony, and a future full of hope. But then, his parents sat me down, slid a thick document across the table, and said the words that cut through me like a knife: "Sign it, or the wedding is off." They thought I was a nobody, a girl who should feel lucky to marry into their rich family. But what they didn't know was that behind my simple lifestyle I was worth millions. And I was about to wipe those smug grins right off their faces. This is my story of how I turned the tables and made them respect me on my terms. My name is Emily Carter, and at 28 years old, I was just 3 days away from marrying the man I loved more than anything, Daniel Morgan. For 2 years, Daniel and I had built a relationship full of laughter, shared dreams, and late-night talks that felt endless. I believed nothing could shake us. But life has a strange way of testing people when they least expect it. Daniel came from a powerful family in Chicago. Old money. The kind of family that had their names on law firms, charities, and buildings across the city. To the outside world, they were respected and admired. But to me, they were intimidating. Not because of their wealth, but because of how they looked at me, like I was a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. See, I grew up in a middle-class home. My parents were teachers who worked long hours and never complained, even when money was tight. They gave me love, support, and something more valuable than wealth: values. They taught me that respect is earned, not bought, and that hard work will always mean more than a fancy last name. I carried those lessons with me into college. I worked harder than anyone I knew, pulling all-nighters, writing papers until my fingers cramped, and applying for every scholarship I could find. Every cent of my tuition I earned. When I graduated with honors in computer science, I felt like I had conquered the world. But life had another surprise waiting. My grandfather, a quiet man who lived simply, passed away during my senior year. To everyone, he looked like an average retired factory worker. But what no one knew was that he had spent decades making smart investments. He left me an inheritance of $7 million. I was stunned. That money could have changed me overnight, but I refused to let it define me. I invested most of it carefully, and with a small portion I started a tech company focused on educational software. By the time I was 26, my company was worth an additional $2 million. So yes, on paper I was worth $9 million. But no one knew that. Not Daniel, not his parents, not even casual friends. Only my mom, dad, my best friend Lily, and my lawyer knew the truth. I kept it that way because I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms. I wanted people to see me for me, not for my bank account. When people looked at me, they just saw Emily, the girl who lived in a nice but modest apartment, drove a simple car, and dressed well but not extravagantly. And I liked it that way. That's when Daniel came into my life. We met at a charity event for underprivileged children. My company had donated some software, and I was there representing my work. Daniel, of course, was there because the Morgan family never missed an important gala. At first glance, he was tall, confident, with warm brown eyes that seemed genuinely interested in people. Not like the other trust fund kids I had seen floating around at these events. When we spoke, the conversation flowed effortlessly. From education inequality to hiking trails, to our shared love of spicy Thai food. There was an instant connection. He wasn't just charming, he was real. And when he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate to give it to him. Our first date? Not some overpriced rooftop dinner or fancy wine bar. No, Daniel showed up with homemade sandwiches and invited me to a picnic in the park. That's when I realized he wasn't like the others. He wasn't trying to impress me with money. He wanted to impress me with himself. And he did. From that day on, we were inseparable. Weekend hikes, movie nights, cooking disasters in my kitchen, deep conversations that lasted until sunrise. With him, life felt light and full of promise. He supported my work, admired my independence, and never once made me feel less because I didn't come from money. But then came the day I met his parents. The Morgans lived in a massive estate in Lake Forest, manicured gardens, towering gates, a house so big it could fit 8 families. When I walked into their home, I felt like I was stepping into another world. His parents, Robert and Catherine Morgan, were polite, but in a way that cut sharp. Catherine especially. She had this way of asking questions that seemed harmless, but were designed to make me feel small. "Oh, Northwestern," she said during dinner. "A fine school. Did you find the scholarship program comprehensive enough? And both your parents are teachers? That must have been financially challenging." It was subtle but clear. She was reminding me where I came from. Daniel's father, Robert, was no better. He spoke mostly to Daniel about people and business deals I knew nothing about. He treated me like I was just there. Not a part of the conversation, not important. Just background. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. Because I wasn't marrying them. I was marrying Daniel. When Daniel proposed on our 2-year anniversary, a sunset cruise on Lake Michigan with his grandmother's emerald ring, I said yes without hesitation. I thought we had faced the worst already. But I was wrong. As we planned the wedding, Catherine's controlling nature grew stronger. She wanted to decide on the venue, the flowers, the guest list, even the cake. And though she never mentioned money directly, the unspoken assumption was clear. They would be paying for everything because clearly I couldn't. I let her believe what she wanted. Correcting her would mean revealing my secret, and I wasn't ready for that. I compromised again and again, until the only thing I insisted on was my wedding dress. A sleek modern design that made me feel confident and beautiful. Of course, Catherine made her usual jab. It's very simple. I suppose it must have been affordable. I swallowed my pride. I told myself it didn't matter. Once Daniel and I were married, we'd build our life together on our own terms. But 3 days before the wedding, my world was turned upside down. Catherine called me for tea. Daniel was busy, she said. It would just be us. I thought naively that maybe this was her way of finally trying to bond with me. I was wrong. When I arrived at their estate, I noticed something strange. Robert's car was parked in the driveway. Inside, the housekeeper led me not to the usual sunroom, but to the formal sitting room. And there they were, Robert in one of his expensive suits, Catherine in a navy designer outfit, both seated like they were at a boardroom meeting. The tea was untouched. Their faces serious. "Emily, dear," Catherine said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please sit." I sat, my stomach twisting. Something wasn't right. Then Robert pulled out a thick document, slid it across the table, and said in his cold, businesslike voice, "This is a prenuptial agreement. Sign it today or the wedding is off." The moment Robert's words left his mouth, the air in the room grew heavy. My heart pounded in my chest. I looked at the thick blue folder on the coffee table, then at the smug expressions on their faces. The moment Robert's words left his mouth, the air in the room grew heavy. My heart pounded in my chest. I looked at the thick blue folder on the coffee table, then at the smug expressions on their faces. A prenuptial agreement? I repeated slowly, as if saying it out loud might make it sound less harsh. Robert leaned back in his chair, hands clasped calmly, as though this was just routine business. "Yes, it's a standard family document. It protects our assets in case things don't work out." Catherine gave a soft laugh, the kind that grated on my nerves. "It's just a formality, dear. Everyone signs these nowadays. Surely you understand." I didn't reach for the document. I sat frozen for a moment, my mind racing. This was the first I'd heard of it. Daniel hadn't mentioned anything. Not once. Finally, I forced my voice to stay calm. "This is the first I'm hearing about a prenup. Daniel and I never discussed this." "Daniel understands the necessity," Catherine interrupted smoothly, waving her hand as though dismissing my concern. "This is how things are done in our family." Her words cut deep. This wasn't a request. It was a demand. Reluctantly, I picked up the document. Years of working with contracts in my own business had trained my eyes to scan quickly, and what I saw made my stomach sink. The agreement was completely one-sided. If Daniel and I divorced, I would walk away with nothing. No matter how many years we spent together, no matter what I contributed. Even worse, there were clauses that could affect my own company, my intellectual property, the very heart of my work. I looked up slowly, fighting to keep my voice even. "This seems very one-sided." Robert waved his hand. "It's standard language. Our family's wealth is substantial, and we must protect it." I tightened my grip on the folder. "And what about my assets? My company? My intellectual property?" Catherine chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Your little software venture is charming, dear, but we're talking about real wealth here. Family wealth. Generational wealth. The scale is entirely different." Her condescension burned. To them, I wasn't a woman with accomplishments. I was a charity case, a nobody who should feel lucky their son had chosen me. Robert leaned forward, voice dripping with fake generosity. Perhaps we can add a line about your company if it makes you feel better. But frankly, Emily, Daniel would always be generous regardless of what the contract says. Heat rose in my face. They were dismissing me, my work, everything I had built. When does this need to be signed? I asked, my voice tight. Today, Catherine replied quickly, pulling a sleek Montblanc pen from her pocket. The wedding is in 3 days. We'd like this settled well before then. I set the folder down carefully, forcing my hands to stay steady. I'll need my lawyer to review this first. Robert raised his brows, clearly annoyed. Your own lawyer? Is that necessary? Our family attorney is one of the best in Chicago. Yes, I replied firmly. But he represents your interests, not mine. And as you said, our interests may not be aligned. For the first time, Catherine's smile faltered. Emily, really? This is standard. Everyone signs these. Then you won't object to giving me 24 hours to review it, I countered. Robert's eyes narrowed. We must insist this be resolved today. These matters become complicated if left too long. With the wedding so close, we cannot risk uncertainty. I stared at them, feeling the weight of what he was saying. Are you saying the wedding depends on me signing this document today, without legal advice? Catherine's smile returned, cold and sharp. What we're saying, dear, is that marrying into this family comes with certain non-negotiable expectations. If you truly love Daniel, you'll understand. Sign it or the wedding is off. Her words hit me like a physical blow. They looked at me with absolute certainty, so sure that I would fold, so sure that I would sign just to keep Daniel and avoid humiliation. But I couldn't. Not like this. I stood, clutching the folder tightly. I'll need to discuss this with Daniel. He's aware of our position, Catherine said, her tone dismissive. He may not have wanted to bring it up, but he knows it's necessary. That was the dagger to my chest. The idea that Daniel knew about this ambush and had let it happen made my breath catch. Nevertheless, I kept my voice steady. Then I'll speak with him myself. Robert stood too, buttoning his jacket. You have until tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. We'll expect your signature, or your decision to cancel the wedding. I nodded stiffly and turned toward the door. As I walked away, I heard Catherine's voice drift from the room. She'll sign. Where else would she find a match like Daniel? Robert chuckled. Certainly not among her parents' community college friends. The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I held myself together long enough to make it out of the driveway. But once I was in my car, tears blurred my vision. My chest ached. I tried to drive home, but twice I had to pull over, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. My phone lit up again and again, Daniel's name flashing on the screen. I couldn't answer. Not yet. I needed time to process what had just happened. By the time I reached my apartment, my body felt heavy. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the prenup folder like it was a stone dragging me down. Finally, I called the one person who I knew would understand, my best friend Lily. She picked up on the first ring. Emily? What's wrong? Your voice sounds shaky. I broke. Tears spilled again as I told her everything. The ambush, the ultimatum, the insult. They did what? Lily shouted. 3 days before your wedding? That's not just manipulative, that's disgusting. Her anger mirrored mine, giving me strength. And the worst part? They said Daniel knew. That he agreed with them. There was silence on the line. Finally, Lily spoke. Emily, that doesn't sound like him. But if it is true, then you need to rethink everything. Either way, this isn't good. I sniffled, curling into myself on the couch. They gave me until tomorrow morning to sign. Do not, under any circumstances, sign that without a lawyer, Lily said firmly. Promise me. I promise, I whispered. But even as I said it, my heart was breaking. Because this wasn't just about the prenup. This was about trust. About Daniel. And whether the man I loved was really on my side or theirs. That night I couldn't avoid him anymore. I finally called him back. He answered immediately, his voice full of concern. Emily, thank God. Mom said you left upset. What happened? I closed my eyes, holding back the anger in my voice. What happened is that your parents ambushed me with a prenup. They said I have to sign it by 9 tomorrow morning, or the wedding is off. They also said you knew about this plan. The silence on the other end told me everything. Daniel, I prompted. He sighed. I didn't know they were going to approach you like that. I told them I'd talk to you myself. So you did know about the prenup. Another pause. Then quietly, yes. The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. I was going to, he said, his voice strained. I just kept putting it off. I didn't want to upset you, not with all the wedding stress. I let out a bitter laugh. So you let your parents do it for you? Like I'm just some problem to be managed. Emily, that's not fair. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? By blindsiding me? By letting them include clauses that could touch my business? That's not protection, Daniel. That's cowardice. Emily, please. It's just a standard legal document. Everyone signs them. Have you even read it? I shot back. Silence. Then softly, not in detail. Dad said it was the family template. The family template that makes sure I walk away with nothing. The one that could give your family claims over my company. That template. I heard him shifting papers on the other end. That can't be right. Read section 4, paragraph 3, I said coldly. A pause. Then his voice uncertain. Okay, I see what you mean. Some of this language is aggressive. They gave me until tomorrow morning to sign. What's your position on that? They shouldn't have done that, Daniel said quickly. Of course the wedding isn't contingent on this. We can work it out. Can we? I whispered. Because your mother made it very clear this is non-negotiable. Either I sign or it's over. Mom can be intense, he said. But she doesn't make these decisions. We do. Then prove it. Call them right now. Tell them the ultimatum is off the table. Emily, be reasonable. A prenup makes sense given the circumstances. What circumstances? That your family has money and I don't. It's more complicated than that. Family trusts, businesses, things you can't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I cut in, my voice trembling with anger. You're saying I'll never measure up. That's what this is about, isn't it? That's not what I meant, he protested. Why are you making this so difficult? It's just a piece of paper we'll hopefully never need. If it's just a piece of paper, then why is it worth canceling our wedding over? He had no answer. Finally, I spoke quietly. You need to decide where you stand, Daniel. With them, or with me. Emily, that's not fair. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, cutting him off. And I hung up before he could say another word. I sat in silence, staring at the folder on the table. My tears dried. My pain hardened. Because if the Morgans wanted to make this about money and power, then maybe it was time they learned who I really was. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with anger, hurt, and betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Catherine's smug smile, Robert's dismissive look, and Daniel's silence on the other end of the phone. By sunrise, I wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had burned itself out. What was left inside me was something harder, sharper, determination. If they wanted to make this about money and power, then maybe it was time I reminded them. I had both. At 6 in the morning, I was already dressed. Not in my usual casual clothes, but in one of my sharp business suits. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of outfit that said, I'm not here to be dismissed. I pulled my hair back into a sleek ponytail, fastened my grandfather's pearl earrings to my ears, and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time since the ambush, I felt steady. I sent a text to my lawyer. Urgent meeting. 7 a.m. prenup situation. Wedding in 3 days. We'll explain in person. His name was Harold Bennett, a man in his 70s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and more legal experience than anyone I'd ever met. He'd been my grandfather's attorney, and after my grandfather passed, he became mine. He knew everything about my finances. He was one of the very few who knew the truth about my inheritance and my company. His response came within seconds. I'll be there at 7 sharp. Bring all documents. By the time Harold walked into my downtown office, I had the prenup spread out on the conference table, notes scribbled in the margins from my late-night review. Good morning, Emily, he said, placing his worn leather briefcase on the table. His tone was calm, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. When I saw your text, I'll admit I was surprised. You never mentioned a prenup when we last talked about the wedding. Because there wasn't one. Not until yesterday. I slid the thick folder toward him. 3 days before my wedding, Robert and Catherine ambushed me with this. They gave me until 9 this morning to sign or cancel the wedding. Harold raised his eyebrows. 3 days before? That's highly unusual and frankly unethical. Read section 4. Especially the part about intellectual property, I said firmly. He pulled on his glasses, adjusted them on his nose, and began to read. For the next 15 minutes, the only sounds were the rustle of pages and the occasional disbelieving grunt from Harold. When he finally set the papers down, he looked at me over the rims of his glasses. Emily, this is one of the most aggressively one-sided prenups I've seen in 45 years of practice. And believe me, I've seen plenty from wealthy families. But this, he tapped the folder. This isn't protection. This is control. I exhaled shakily, relief flooding through me. So I'm not crazy for thinking that? Not at all. They designed this to strip you of any rights, to leave you with nothing. Even in the event you spent decades married. And the intellectual property clause. He shook his head. Unacceptable. They're trying to create a loophole that could give them leverage over your company. It's outrageous. My hands tightened into fists. Can we fight it? A slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that probably terrified his opponents in court. Fight it? My dear, we're not only going to fight it, we're going to turn it back on them. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a yellow legal pad. First, let's be clear about your position. Your net worth currently stands at what? About $9 million, I said quietly. He nodded, writing it down. $7.5 million in investments from your grandfather, and about $1.5 million from your company's valuation, correct? Yes. And the Morgans have no idea? None. For a moment Harold chuckled, a deep rumble of amusement. Well then, this is going to be a very interesting conversation. They thought they were bullying a poor schoolteacher's daughter. They have no idea they're up against someone who could rival their own assets. His confidence steadied me even more. Do you want to salvage the relationship? Harold asked carefully. Or are we simply preparing for battle? I thought about Daniel, about our first date in the park, about the way he looked at me when he proposed, about the man I believed he was beneath his family's shadow. I want to salvage it, I admitted, but only if Daniel is willing to stand beside me as an equal. I'm not marrying into a family where I'm treated like a charity case. Harold nodded. Fair enough. Then here's what we'll do. We draft a counter prenup. One that protects both parties equally. One that establishes you as a partner, not a dependent. For the next 2 hours, Harold and I worked through the details. Every clause in their original prenup we rewrote. Property acquired during the marriage would be shared fairly. Intellectual property, especially my company, was untouchable, fully mine. Investments, inheritances, and businesses would remain protected for both of us. When we finished, Harold leaned back satisfied. Now this, he said, tapping the document, is what a fair prenup looks like. Not a weapon, but a shield. Equal protection, equal respect. I nodded. Good. Now how do we deliver it? Timing and setting are crucial, Harold said. You'll need to speak to Daniel first. Alone. If he's truly on your side, he'll present this to his parents with you. If not, he shrugged. Well, then you'll know. I thought for a moment. We'll meet them on neutral ground. Not their estate. Somewhere public, but private enough for serious discussion. Lakeview Restaurant. They have a private dining room. Perfect, Harold agreed. Upscale enough for their tastes, but not their turf. I'll prepare the paperwork and supporting documents. Bring your financial statements. They need to see without question who they're dealing with. I pulled out a folder from my desk drawer. Already printed. Bank statements, investment accounts, company valuation. All updated as of last month. Harold flipped through them, nodding with approval. Excellent. When you put these on the table, Emily, their whole perception of you will change. Mark my words. For the first time since the nightmare began, I smiled. When Harold left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the 2 folders in front of me, their prenup and mine. One represented their attempt to control me. The other represented my power, my independence, my worth. The choice was clear. I picked up my phone and texted Daniel. We need to talk. 1 p.m. at Marcelli's. Just us. His reply came quickly. I'll be there. I love you. I stared at those 3 words on the screen. A part of me still believed him, still wanted to believe that love was enough. But love without respect, without truth, that wasn't love at all. I closed my eyes, drew in a long breath and whispered to myself, they wanted a fight. They've got one. Marcelli's was one of our favorite restaurants. Not fancy enough to draw too much attention, but elegant enough to feel special. We'd celebrated anniversaries there, birthdays, even the night Daniel told me he wanted to marry me. So when I chose it for our meeting, I knew it would stir up memories of better times. Memories we desperately needed, because this conversation wasn't going to be easy. I arrived a few minutes early. The hostess, who knew us as regulars, guided me to a quiet corner table tucked away from the bustle of lunch traffic. I sat down, placed my leather portfolio on the seat beside me, and tried to steady my nerves. Daniel walked in right at 1 o'clock. He looked tired. His usually perfect suit was rumpled, his tie slightly crooked, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept either. When he saw me, relief flooded his face. "Emily," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank you for coming. I've been worried sick." I studied him carefully, searching for the man I had fallen in love with. The man who had once packed homemade sandwiches for a picnic instead of trying to impress me with money. "I almost didn't come," I admitted quietly. His shoulders slumped. I know I messed up. I should have told you about the prenup myself. I just didn't want to upset you. And then my parents. Your parents blindsided me." I cut in, my voice firmer than I expected. 3 days before our wedding, they threatened to cancel everything if I didn't sign. And they implied you were fully on board with it. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Frustration etched on his face. I wasn't on board with the ambush. I told them I'd handle it. But yes, I knew about the prenup. Every marriage in my family has had one. It's tradition. It's expected. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "And you didn't think I deserved to know that before we planned our wedding? Before your parents treated me like I was some gold digger trying to grab their fortune?" He flinched. "I thought I could protect you from their intensity. I thought if I delayed, maybe I could soften it." "That's not protection, Daniel. That's avoidance. That's letting them throw me to the wolves." Silence stretched between us. The waiter approached, but neither of us ordered food. Just water. My stomach was too tight for anything else. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I told them last night that their ultimatum was unacceptable. That if anyone was going to cancel this wedding, it would be me, not them." I blinked, surprised. "You said that?" He nodded, a small flicker of determination in his eyes. "I told them I wouldn't let them bully you. Dad called me naive. Mom cried, accused me of choosing you over family. But I stood my ground, Emily. For the first time in my life, I stood up to them." A strange mix of pride and hope swelled inside me. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," he admitted, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "But it was liberating. I realized I've spent my whole life trying to keep the peace with them, always bending to their demands. But this time I couldn't. Not when it's about us." I took a breath. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. "Daniel, there's something I haven't told you," I said carefully. "Something important." His brow furrowed. "What is it?" I reached into my portfolio and pulled out the folder of financial documents Harold had prepared. My hands trembled slightly as I slid it across the table. He opened it, confusion on his face at first. Then his eyes widened. He flipped through the pages, disbelief growing with each line he read. $7.5 million in investments, $1.5 million company valuation. His voice trailed off. "Emily, this says you're worth $9 million. I met his stunned gaze, my voice steady. "Yes, I am." He sat back, shock written all over him. How is this even possible?" "My grandfather," I explained softly. "He lived simply, but he invested wisely. When he passed, he left me $7 million. I invested most of it, used some to start my company. By 26, my company was valued at $2 million. That's where the rest comes from." Daniel shook his head, almost laughing in disbelief. "All this time my parents treated you like some charity case, like you needed saving. And they saw me as less," I finished for him, "when in reality I could stand beside you as an equal." His eyes flicked back to the papers, then to me. There was shock, yes, but also something else, hurt. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. Didn't you trust me? The question hit hard. I'd been dreading it, but I owed him honesty. It wasn't about trust, I said firmly. At first it didn't seem relevant. I wanted to be loved for me, not for my money. And when I saw how much your family cared about wealth and status, I held back even more. I didn't want them or you to see me differently. So this was a test? His tone was sharp, defensive. Not of you, I said quickly, leaning forward. Never of you. But yes, in a way it was a test of your family. And they failed it spectacularly. He let out a long sigh, running his hands over his face. God, Emily, do you realize what this means? My parents are going to. I know exactly what it means, I interrupted. And that's why I'm not walking into this blindly. I pulled out another folder. The counter prenup Harold and I had drafted. I slid it across the table, my voice calm but firm. This is what I'm willing to sign. Protects both of us equally. My assets, your assets, property acquired during marriage, and most importantly, my company. Everything is fair. No one gets steamrolled. No one gets stripped of their rights. Daniel opened it and scanned the pages. His eyes moved quickly, but this time his expression shifted from shock to understanding. This is reasonable, he admitted. Balanced. Fair. He looked up at me. Why didn't my parents draft something like this? Because this was never about fairness, Daniel. It was about control. They don't see me as an equal. They see me as someone who should be grateful to be chosen. His jaw tightened. Not anymore. Not after this. I folded my hands on the table. So the question is, Daniel, where do you stand? With them? Or with me? He didn't hesitate this time. He reached across the table and took my hand, his eyes locked on mine. I stand with you. Always. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe. Then here's what we do, I said. Tonight we meet your parents. Together. On neutral ground. We present this prenup as non-negotiable. And we make it clear this marriage is between us, not them. If they want to be part of our lives, they need to respect that. He nodded slowly, determination hardening his expression. You're right. It's time. Time to set boundaries they should have learned a long time ago. I squeezed his hand. Then we're agreed. He smiled faintly. Emily Carter, you are magnificent. I smiled back, a flicker of warmth breaking through the storm. We are magnificent. Together. At 6 o'clock sharp, Daniel and I pulled up outside Lakeview Restaurant. It was one of the most discreet, upscale dining spots in the city. A place where powerful people held private meetings behind closed doors. The kind of place his parents respected. I chose it deliberately. Not their home. Not our apartment. Neutral ground. Daniel stepped out first, coming around to open my door. His hand lingered in mine as I stood, both of us silently gathering courage. Inside, the maitre d' guided us to a private dining room. A large mahogany table sat in the center, polished until it gleamed, for crystal glasses caught the glow of a chandelier overhead. The walls were lined with elegant art, the windows opening to a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. We sat side by side, not across from each other. United. A choice I made intentionally. They'll be late, Daniel murmured, his jaw tight. It's a power move. Mom never arrives anywhere on time. She likes to keep people waiting. He was right. 15 minutes passed before the door finally opened. Robert and Catherine Morgan swept in like royalty. Robert in a charcoal suit, crisp and commanding. Catherine in a deep burgundy designer dress, diamonds glittering at her ears. Daniel, darling, Catherine said, moving straight past me to kiss her son's cheek. What a lovely choice of venue. Though I don't quite understand why we needed this formality for a simple signature. Her voice was dripping with expectation, like she already believed the battle was won. Robert barely nodded in my direction before taking his seat. I trust you've come to a sensible decision, Emily. 9 o'clock has passed, but we're willing to be flexible. I didn't flinch. I gestured to the chairs across from us. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Something in my tone must have caught Catherine off guard. She sat down slowly, her sharp eyes narrowing, as if realizing this wasn't going to be the easy surrender she imagined. Daniel spoke first. His voice was calm but firm. We reviewed the prenup you gave Emily. It is unacceptable, both in its approach and in its terms. Robert's eyebrows shot up. Unacceptable? That document has protected Morgan assets for generations. Your brother signed one. Your sister did too. There was no drama then. That's because they married people from wealthy families, Daniel countered. The power dynamics were different. This isn't about protection. This is about control. Control. Catherine repeated with a scoff. Daniel, please. This is a legal safeguard, not a sociology lesson. Emily is being overly dramatic. I placed my leather portfolio on the table and opened it, sliding a folder forward. My voice was steady. We agree that protection makes sense, which is why we've prepared an alternative. One that protects both parties equally. Robert's jaw tightened. That was not the arrangement. You were to sign our document, not present your own. Plans change, I replied calmly, especially when new information comes to light. The waiter entered briefly to take drink orders. Catherine requested wine. Robert asked for whiskey. Daniel and I stuck with sparkling water. No distractions. No dulling of senses. When the door closed again, I slid the second folder across the table. This is our counter prenup. It ensures fairness. Protection for the Morgans. And for me. Catherine gave a sharp laugh, the sound dripping with mockery. Your assets, dear? I hardly think your little company requires the same level of protection as generations of Morgan wealth. Daniel's voice cut through her condescension. You might be surprised. I reached into my portfolio again, pulled out the financial statements Harold had prepared, and placed them on top of the folder. My current net worth, I said evenly, is approximately $9 million. 7.5 in diversified investments from my grandfather's estate. 1.5 from my company's valuation. For the first time since I'd known them, both Robert and Catherine froze. Catherine's smile faltered. Her color rose. That's impossible. You drive a 5-year-old Audi. Your parents are teachers. I value responsibility over appearances, I replied simply. And yes, my parents are teachers. They taught me hard work, humility, and the value of education. Lessons that have served me well. Robert snatched up the statements, flipping through them with sharp, practiced eyes. His face tightened as he realized they were legitimate. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, assigned valuation from a reputable firm. These appear accurate, he admitted reluctantly. Catherine shook her head, still in disbelief. Why keep this secret? Why not tell us? I met her gaze directly. Would you have treated me differently if you had known? Her silence was answer enough. This changes everything, Robert said, his tone shifting from disdain to calculation. Exactly, I said. That's why this prenup is structured fairly. Both parties retain their own assets. Any property acquired during the marriage is shared equitably. And most importantly, my company and intellectual property remain fully mine, just as the Morgan firm remains yours. Robert studied the document, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. He wasn't dismissive now. He was evaluating, considering. Catherine, however, was still struggling to recover. Your grandfather left you $7 million, she asked, incredulous. What did he do? He invested wisely over a lifetime of modest living, I said evenly. Not unlike the first Morgan who built your fortune, I imagine. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. Mom, Dad, the issue here isn't just the prenup. It's how you handled this. Ambushing Emily 3 days before our wedding, threatening to cancel it unless she signed immediately. That wasn't protection. That was coercion. We thought it best to resolve things quickly, Robert defended, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Quickly, Daniel shot back. You humiliated the woman I love. You tried to corner her like she had no choice. That ends now. For the first time, Robert looked uncomfortable. Catherine opened her mouth to speak, but Daniel's voice rose, firm and unshakable. You made assumptions about Emily. You underestimated her. You tried to control her. And you were wrong. My chest swelled with pride. For the first time, Daniel wasn't just standing beside me. He was standing up for me. Robert cleared his throat, turning his attention back to the document. Some of these terms are unusual, he said cautiously, but not unreasonable. Catherine whipped her head toward him, eyes wide. Robert. He raised a hand, silencing her. We'll have our attorneys review this tomorrow morning. If everything checks out, we can sign. I leaned forward. You have until 3 o'clock tomorrow. The wedding is in 2 days. This must be resolved before then. Catherine bristled. She wasn't used to being given deadlines. But Robert nodded, businessman to businessman, even if I wasn't one of his. We'll review and respond by 3, he said firmly. Catherine stayed quiet. Her silence told me more than her words ever could. The meeting ended there. We didn't order dinner. We didn't linger. But as Robert offered his hand to me, a handshake that would have been unthinkable 24 hours ago, I knew something fundamental had shifted. You are formidable, he said almost grudgingly. The Morgan family may benefit from such unexpected perspectives. I accepted his handshake, holding his gaze. I look forward to contributing, as an equal. Catherine's farewell was colder, but for the first time her condescension had cracks in it. When they finally left, Daniel turned to me, his eyes shining with pride. He pulled me into his arms, whispering against my hair. You were incredible. Absolutely incredible. I smiled, resting my forehead against his. We were incredible. Together. The ride home from Lakeview Restaurant felt different. The city lights blurred past the car windows, but for once my chest didn't feel heavy. I wasn't holding back tears. I wasn't replaying insults in my head. Instead, I felt steady, strong. Daniel squeezed my hand the whole way home. You were brilliant tonight, he whispered more than once. And for the first time since the nightmare began, I believed him. It wasn't just me who had been brilliant. It was us. For months, maybe years, his parents had held the strings. But now, for the first time, Daniel and I had cut them loose. The next morning, Harold called me at my office. Well, I asked, breath caught in my throat. They've received our counter prenup, he said smoothly. Their lawyers reviewed it this morning. I've just gotten word they'll accept with only minor edits to wording. Nothing that changes the balance of the agreement. Relief flooded through me so strongly that I had to sit down. So it's done. It's done, Harold confirmed. They tried to buy more time, of course, but I reminded them of their own deadline. 3 o'clock. And suddenly they were very efficient. I laughed, a real laugh, not the bitter kind that had been escaping me for days. Harold, I don't know how to thank you. You already did, he replied warmly. By standing tall. I've represented many clients in prenup battles, Emily. Few handle it with your grace and courage. His words stayed with me all day. That afternoon, Daniel came to my apartment with a signed copy of the new agreement. He placed it gently on the coffee table, almost like a peace offering. It's official, he said softly. We're protected. Both of us. Equally. I stared down at the folder, my chest tightening, not from fear this time but from relief. Doesn't it feel strange? I whispered. How something that nearly destroyed us ended up making us stronger. Daniel sat beside me, slipping his arm around my shoulders. Not strange. Necessary. We had to face them. We had to face this. Otherwise, it would have haunted us for years. He was right. 2 days before the wedding, Catherine did something I never expected. She called me. Not Daniel. Me. Emily, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. May I stop by tomorrow morning? Just the two of us. I'd like a private word. For a moment, suspicion twisted in my stomach. Another ambush? Another attempt to regain control? But something in her tone, hesitant, almost vulnerable, made me pause. Yes, I said finally. Come by at 10. When Catherine arrived the next day, she wasn't dressed in her usual power suits. She wore a pale blue dress, simple, almost gentle. She looked less like the intimidating matriarch of a wealthy family and more like a mother. I offered her tea, and for once she actually accepted, sipping slowly instead of using it as a prop. I owe you an apology, she said at last, her eyes fixed on the cup in her hands. I blinked, almost sure I'd misheard her. An apology? Yes. She took a shaky breath. Not the half-hearted acknowledgement I gave at the restaurant. A real one. Emily, I misjudged you. I treated you with condescension, suspicion, even cruelty. And I shouldn't have. Not because of your money, but because my son loves you. That alone should have been enough for me. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. This was Catherine, the woman who had once mocked my parents' careers, who had sneered at my choice of dress, who had threatened to cancel my wedding. And now she was apologizing. "That can't have been easy to admit," I said finally. She let out a soft, rueful laugh. "The Morgans are not known for humility. It's a family weakness. One I hope you and Daniel don't inherit." Her words carried more truth than she probably realized. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. "I brought you something. A peace offering of sorts." Inside were sapphire and diamond earrings, clearly old, clearly valuable. "These belonged to Daniel's great-grandmother," Catherine explained. "She wasn't from wealth either. She was the daughter of a factory worker. When she married into this family, people said she didn't belong. But in the end, she saved the Morgan business during the Depression. Without her, there might not be a family fortune today." I ran my fingers lightly over the earrings, the history heavy in them. "They're beautiful," I whispered. "Something old, something blue," Catherine said softly. "Perhaps you'll wear them tomorrow." For the first time since I'd met her, there was no superiority in her voice. Just hope, maybe even respect. I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Catherine. I will." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, smoothing her dress. "Welcome to the family, Emily. Truly." And just like that she left. The morning of the wedding, I stood in a quiet room at the venue while my mother helped arrange my veil. My best friend Lily fussed with my train. "You look stunning," Lily whispered, her eyes shining. "But more than that, you look different." "Confidence," my mom said, smiling proudly. My daughter finally stopped hiding her light. They were right. I felt it too. For years I'd been careful, afraid to show too much, to reveal my wealth, to push back against people like Catherine. But standing up for myself had changed me. I wasn't just marrying Daniel tomorrow. I was marrying into a family that finally saw me, not as less, not as lucky, but as equal. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. The sky was a soft shade of blue, the kind of sky that felt like a blessing. The sun streamed through my bedroom window, warming my face as I sat in front of the mirror. My hands trembled as Lily adjusted the veil on my head. My mom stood behind me, her eyes shining with tears she was trying so hard not to let fall. "You're glowing," she whispered, her voice thick. "Emily, I don't think I've ever seen you look so happy." I smiled, though my chest felt heavy with nerves. "I'm not just happy, Mom. I'm ready." And I meant it. For the first time since all the chaos had begun, I wasn't walking into this day with doubt or fear. I was walking into it as myself, fully, completely, unapologetically. The venue was breathtaking. A historic chapel overlooking Lake Michigan, with tall arched windows that let the golden sunlight pour in. Rows of white flowers lined the aisle, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Guests were already seated when I arrived. Some faces familiar, some not. Family, friends, colleagues, even distant relatives. The air buzzed with whispers, the anticipation palpable. But when I stepped into the bridal room, I noticed something unexpected. Catherine was waiting for me. She wasn't in her usual bold colors or glittering jewels. Instead, she wore a simple gray dress with a delicate pearl necklace. Subtle, elegant, almost understated. When she saw me, she rose to her feet. For a moment, the room felt tense. But then Catherine held out a small envelope. "This," she said softly, "was written by Robert's grandmother, the woman whose earrings you'll be wearing today. She wrote it on her wedding day. I thought you might like to have it." I hesitated, then took the envelope. Inside was a faded letter, written in neat cursive. "Marriage is not about wealth or power. It is about choosing each other again and again, even when the world tests you. Hold your head high. Speak your truth. And remember, you are equal." My throat tightened as I read the words. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking. Catherine's eyes softened, her usual sharpness dimmed. "You've already proven those words true, Emily. Today, I hope you'll let me stand not as your critic, but as your family." For the first time, I believed her. The music began. My heart pounded as I stepped to the doors of the chapel, my father at my side. The heavy wooden doors opened, and I walked into the sunlight. Every eye turned toward me. The whispers stopped. But I didn't see the guests. I didn't see the flowers or the decorations. I saw only Daniel, standing at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes locked on mine. His expression was everything I needed. love, pride, relief. I walked slowly down the aisle, my steps steady, my father's arm firm around mine. When we reached the altar, my father kissed my cheek, then placed my hand into Daniel's. And in that moment it felt like everything else disappeared. The ceremony began. The minister spoke about love, commitment, and partnership. His words washed over me, grounding me in the moment. When it was time for our vows, Daniel went first. "Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "from the moment I met you, you challenged me. You pushed me to see the world differently. You made me stronger, braver, better. I stand here today not because of tradition or family expectations, but because I choose you. Always. No matter what storms come our way." Tears blurred my vision, but I smiled through them. Then it was my turn. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling at first, but then growing stronger. "You saw me when others didn't. You loved me when others judged. And even when fear and doubt tried to pull us apart, you stood with me. I promise to choose you every day. To fight beside you, not against you. To build a life with you. Not as your shadow, but as your equal." The chapel was silent. Every guest was listening, hanging on every word. When the minister finally said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Daniel pulled me close and kissed me. The crowd erupted into applause, but I barely heard it. All I could feel was his arms around me, steady and sure. The reception that followed was unlike anything I'd imagined. Robert gave a toast, his words careful, almost formal. "To my son and his new wife," he said, raising his glass. "May their union bring strength not just to themselves, but to all who witness it. Emily, welcome." It wasn't warm, not exactly, but it was acceptance. And from Robert Morgan, that was monumental. Then Catherine stood, her glass trembling slightly in her hand. "I wasn't sure about Emily when I first met her," she admitted, her voice carrying across the room. "But what I've learned in these past days is that she is strong, fierce, exactly the kind of woman Daniel needs. And exactly the kind of woman this family needs." To Emily. The applause that followed was louder, warmer. For once, Catherine didn't sit back smugly, waiting for approval. She looked at me, eyes steady, and nodded. A silent truce. Maybe even respect. Later, as the night wound down, Daniel and I stole a moment outside. The air was cool, the lake shimmering under the moonlight. "We did it," he whispered, pulling me close. "Yes," I said softly. "We did." But inside I knew it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about everything that had led us here. The battles, the tears, the ultimatums, the reveal of my secret. All of it had forged something unshakable between us. I wasn't just Daniel's wife now. I was Emily Morgan, a woman who had faced down the storm and come out standing tall. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to the sound of waves outside our hotel window. For a moment I just lay there in silence, the sheets tangled around me, Daniel's arm heavy across my waist. Sunlight spilled across the room, warm and golden, and the events of the past week washed over me like a dream. It was real. I was married. Not just married, but married on my terms. I turned, studying Daniel's sleeping face. He looked younger somehow, like the weight of his parents had been lifted. I traced a fingertip along his jaw and whispered, "We made it." He stirred, pulling me closer without even opening his eyes. "Of course we did," he mumbled, half asleep. "We're unstoppable." And in that moment I believed it. Our honeymoon was in Santorini, Greece. Whitewashed buildings perched on cliffs, blue domes gleaming under the sun, endless views of the Aegean Sea. For the first time in months I let myself breathe. No lawyers, no ultimatums, no judgmental stares. Just us. We explored cobblestone streets hand in hand, laughed over fresh seafood dinners, and stayed up late talking on balconies as the stars spread across the sky. At night, Daniel would look at me like he had during our very first date, like nothing else in the world existed. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," he said one evening, his arm draped around me as we watched the sunset. "Not fighting, not proving ourselves. Just us." I smiled, leaning into him. But maybe all that fighting made this sweeter. He kissed the top of my head. Maybe it did. One night, halfway through the trip, we sat at a little cafe overlooking the sea. I found myself staring at the rippling water, lost in thought. Daniel noticed. "What's on your mind?" "I was just thinking about me, about how much has changed." He tilted his head. Changed how? When we first started this relationship, I said softly, I was always careful, always quiet. I didn't want to cause waves. I didn't want to seem difficult. I thought that was how I had to be, to fit in with your family. He frowned. Emily. But now, I cut in gently. Now I'm not afraid to speak. I'm not afraid to stand up for myself, or for us. And it feels good. Daniel smiled slowly, pride flickering in his eyes. That's the Emily I fell in love with. Strong, brave, fierce. I laughed softly. I don't know if I was always that, but maybe you helped me become it. We clinked our glasses together, the clatter echoing softly in the night. When we came home 2 weeks later, I felt different. Calmer, stronger, ready for whatever came next. But next came faster than I expected. Just 3 days after we returned, Catherine called Daniel. There's a dinner Friday night, she said smoothly. Robert has invited several partners from the firm. It will be good for Emily to integrate. The word integrate hit me wrong. When Daniel told me, I raised an eyebrow. Integrate? Like I'm a new employee. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. She probably didn't mean it that way. I gave him a look. Daniel. He held up his hands. Okay. She probably did. I crossed my arms. So what do we do? Daniel hesitated. It's tricky. These dinners are less about food and more about showing unity. If we don't go, it looks like we're pulling away. If we do go, they'll test you. I thought for a long moment. Then we go. But we go on our terms. No bending. No playing small. Daniel smiled faintly, pride flickering in his eyes again. That's my wife talking. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully. Not to impress Catherine. Not to outshine anyone. But to show confidence. A sleek navy dress. Pearl earrings. Hair pinned in soft waves. Simple, elegant, but undeniable. When we walked into the private dining room of the Morgan firm's favorite restaurant, the chatter quieted for a moment. Heads turned. Catherine's eyes flickered over me, assessing, but she said nothing. Robert rose from his seat, greeting us formally. Daniel, Emily, thank you for joining us. We were seated near the center of the table, surrounded by lawyers, partners, and family friends. The conversations buzzed with talk of mergers, stocks, and firm expansion. First, I stayed quiet listening, but when one of the partners turned to me and asked, So, Emily, what do you do? The moment arrived. I didn't shrink back. I run a company, I said clearly. Tech consulting. We specialize in helping small businesses scale online. Last year, we crossed $1.5 million in valuation. The partner's eyebrows shot up. Impressive. Robert glanced at me sharply, but said nothing. Catherine's lips thinned. Another partner leaned in, curiosity in his eyes. And what's your growth projection for this year? I smiled steady. 20%. We've been reinvesting profits, expanding services. The demand is there. The table went quiet for a moment. Then the partner chuckled. You're sharper than I expected. I held his gaze. You'll find I'm full of surprises. Later that evening, when dessert was served, Catherine finally spoke. You handled yourself well tonight, Emily, she said, her tone neutral, but her eyes revealing more. A grudging respect. Thank you, I said simply. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider at their table. I didn't feel like a girl begging for a seat. I felt like someone who belonged, not because they let me, but because I claimed it. As Daniel and I left the dinner, he leaned close, whispering, You were incredible. I smiled, my heart light. Get used to it. This is who I am now. And deep down I knew it was true. Married life started sweet. For the first few weeks everything felt calm, peaceful. But calm waters never last forever. Started with a phone call. Daniel was in his office at the firm when Robert walked in unannounced. That night over dinner, Daniel told me what had happened. My father wants me to start shadowing him more closely, Daniel said, his fork moving nervously around his plate. Meetings, late nights, networking events. He says it's time I stop splitting focus and prepare to take over. I set my fork down. Splitting focus? He means me. Daniel hesitated. Not just you. He means anything that isn't the firm. A wave of frustration rose in my chest. Daniel, we just got married. And my company is expanding right now. Are we supposed to just put our lives on pause because your father wants more control? He rubbed his forehead, already tired. It's not that simple. The firm has been his life. He expects the same from me. If I don't step up, he'll see it as weakness. I leaned forward, my voice sharper than I meant. So what about us? What about me? Am I supposed to sit quietly while your father dictates how much of you I get to keep? The words hung between us, heavy and raw. That week, Daniel came home late 3 nights in a row. Meetings, dinners, networking events. I tried to be understanding. I tried to remind myself that marriage wasn't about constant sunshine. But every time I looked at the clock and saw it creeping past 10. Every time I reheated dinner alone, the frustration grew. One night I finally said it. When he walked in, loosening his tie, exhaustion written all over his face, I stood in the kitchen with my arms crossed. This isn't working, Daniel. He froze, the words hitting him like a slap. What do you mean? I mean, I didn't marry your family. I married you. And right now it feels like I've lost you to them all over again. His jaw tightened. Emily, I'm trying to balance both. But this is my duty. Duty. My voice cracked. What about your duty to me? To us? Silence filled the room. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time I saw guilt in his eyes. The next morning we barely spoke. He left early for the firm. I buried myself in work, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. But later that afternoon my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Meet me on the rooftop at 8. Please. When I arrived, the city stretched out beneath us, glittering with lights. Daniel was already there, leaning against the railing, his suit jacket draped over a chair. I'm sorry, he said as soon as I walked up. His voice was rough, almost breaking. I've been failing you. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. It's not just me, Daniel. You've been failing yourself too. You promised me we'd stand together, but you're letting him pull you back into the same trap. He turned, his eyes shining with something raw. Do you think I don't know that? Every night I sit in those meetings, I hear his voice in my head telling me this is what I was born to do. And then I hear your voice telling me I was born to be more. And I don't know how to reconcile the two. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Then choose, Daniel. Not once. Not just at the wedding. Every day. Choose what kind of man you want to be. Choose us. For a long moment he just looked at me, his chest rising and falling. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could hardly breathe. I choose you, he whispered fiercely. Every time. Even when I mess up. Even when I get lost. I choose you. Tears filled my eyes, hot and uncontrollable. Then prove it. Not to me. To yourself. The days that followed weren't magically easier. Robert still called, still pushed, still dangled the future of the firm like a prize Daniel had to earn. But Daniel started drawing lines. He refused late-night dinners that weren't necessary. He skipped one networking event, choosing instead to take me out on a date. Just the two of us, no suits, no expectations. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One night, as we sat on our couch eating takeout, I rested my head on his shoulder. This is what I wanted, I whispered. Not perfection, just partnership. Daniel kissed my hair. That's all I want too. And I realized then that marriage wasn't about never fighting. It was about fighting and coming back stronger. About choosing each other again and again even when the storm hit. And as long as we kept doing that, we'd be okay. It started with an invitation. A polished envelope arrived at our apartment one Thursday morning, sealed with the Morgan family crest. Inside was a short note, handwritten by Robert himself. Emily, Catherine, and I would like to discuss an opportunity. Dinner at our home Friday evening. Just you. Not Daniel. I stared at the card, my stomach tightening. Just me? When Daniel came home that night, I showed him the letter. His face darkened immediately. They want you alone. That's a trap. I nodded slowly. I know, but maybe it's time I face them myself. No buffer. No excuses. Daniel looked torn. Emily, you don't owe them anything. You've already proven yourself. I met his eyes. I know, but I'm not afraid anymore. And if they think they can corner me, they'll learn otherwise. Friday evening, I arrived at the Morgan estate. The mansion loomed against the sky, lit by soft golden lights. A servant led me into the dining room, where Robert and Catherine were already waiting. The table was set for 3. No Daniel. No distractions. Emily, Catherine said smoothly, her smile polite but sharp. Thank you for coming. Robert gestured to the chair across from them. Please sit. We've been discussing something that could benefit everyone. I sat, folding my hands in my lap, keeping my expression neutral. I'm listening. Robert leaned forward. Your company, tech consulting, correct? Impressive numbers for such a young operation, but we believe it would thrive under larger management, with access to Morgan resources. In other words, I said evenly, you want to buy me out. Catherine tilted her head. Think of it less as buying out and more as bringing you into the fold. With our guidance, your company could expand globally. And of course, you'd have a comfortable role within the Morgan firm. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face calm. A comfortable role, I repeated, meaning less control, less independence. Robert gave a small dismissive wave. Independence is overrated when you can have stability. For a moment, silence hung between us. Then I smiled faintly. You know, I was expecting something like this. I just didn't think it would happen so soon. Catherine's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim folder, my own prepared statement. I've already been approached by investors. 2 weeks ago, in fact. They offered to buy a minority stake in my company. I turned them down, because I don't need outside control. What I need is partners who respect my vision. Robert's jaw tightened. Catherine's smile faltered. I continued, my voice steady. What you're offering isn't partnership. It's absorption. You want me under your roof where you can dictate terms. But let me make this clear. I didn't fight for months just to hand over my freedom for a paycheck. Catherine's voice sharpened. Do you have any idea what you're walking away from? The Morgan name carries power, protection, influence. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. And do you know what I carry? $9 million of my own, a growing company, and the strength to walk away from anyone who underestimates me, including you. For the first time, Catherine had no response. Robert's eyes narrowed, but his tone shifted, less commanding, more calculating. So you'd rather stand alone? I held his gaze. I'd rather stand free. The rest of the dinner passed stiffly. We ate in silence, the clink of silverware louder than words. When the plates were cleared, Robert finally spoke. You are a formidable woman, Emily. I see now why Daniel chose you. It wasn't quite praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was something in between. When I left the mansion that night, the air outside felt cooler, fresher. Like I'd shed another weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. When I got home, Daniel was pacing by the window, worry written all over his face. Well? He asked as soon as I stepped inside. I smiled, slipping into his arms. They tried. They failed. Relief washed over him and he kissed my forehead. I should have been there. I shook my head. No, this one was mine. And I think they finally understand that. Daniel pulled me close, whispering, I'm so proud of you. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time I truly felt it. We weren't just surviving his family's tests anymore. We were winning them. And we were winning on our terms. Life after that dinner felt different. Not because Robert and Catherine suddenly became warm, doting in-laws. They didn't. Their sharp edges didn't disappear overnight. But something had shifted. The next time we saw them at a family gathering, Catherine didn't offer backhanded compliments. She asked about my company instead. Genuinely curious, not condescending. Robert didn't glare at me across the table. He actually nodded when I spoke. It wasn't affection. Not yet. But it was respect. And to me that was enough. One Sunday, a few weeks later, Catherine called unexpectedly. Emily, she said, her tone softer than usual. I wanted to ask if you'd like to join me for tea tomorrow. Just us. I hesitated, then agreed. The next day we sat in her sunroom, sunlight spilling through tall windows. She poured the tea herself, something she usually left to staff. For a while we made small talk. Then she set her cup down and looked at me, her eyes steady. You remind me of myself, she admitted quietly. When I married into this family, I thought I had to bend. I thought I had to be grateful for any place at the table. It took me years to realize that respect isn't given. It's claimed. Her words surprised me. For the first time, I glimpsed not the sharp matriarch, but the woman behind the role. I smiled faintly. Maybe we're not so different then. She nodded slowly. Perhaps not. Just don't lose yourself the way I almost did. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest Catherine Morgan would ever come. And strangely, it was enough. Back at home, Daniel and I settled into a rhythm. Work, dinners, late-night talks, lazy Sundays. Normal life. But there was nothing ordinary about how it felt now. Because every day, I carried with me the lessons of the battles we'd fought. That standing tall wasn't about shouting the loudest. It was about refusing to shrink. That love wasn't about blind compromise. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when the world tried to tear us apart. That money, power, and family names meant nothing if you didn't know your own worth. One evening, Daniel and I sat on our balcony overlooking the city, glasses of wine in hand. He reached over, threading his fingers through mine. Do you ever think about how close we came to falling apart? I nodded softly. All the time. And yet here we are. I smiled. Here we are. We sat in silence for a while, the city lights flickering below us. Then I said the words I'd been holding on to. Daniel, I don't regret any of it. Not the fights, not the pain, not even the tears. Because every single moment made us stronger. It forced me to stop hiding. It forced us to stand together. He kissed my hand, his eyes shining. I wouldn't change a thing either. And in that quiet moment I knew the truth. The storm had shaped us, but it hadn't broken us. So here's what I learned, what I want anyone listening to this story to carry with them. Never let anyone decide your worth. Not family, not money, not tradition. If you love someone, fight for them, but never lose yourself in the fight. And when the world tells you to shrink, to bend, to be grateful for scraps, remember this. You don't have to. You are enough. You are equal. And you deserve to stand tall. Always.